Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Event Hustler Show. We try to join you about once a week here on Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn. And it's just casual, great conversations. I always find that when we do these conversations, the 5 or 10 minutes before we go live is basically what we wanted to talk about anyway. We're in the midst of a great conversation. And so I'm really looking forward to continuing the conversation I was just having with Jim Louderbeck of VidCon. Jim, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me here. It's great. This is a lot of fun. We were just saying before that we've been looking at a lot of tools, but you use StreamYard to get this out. I haven't used it yet. So I was excited when I first connected. I'm like, ooh, I get to try a new piece of software.
That's like the tech geek in all of us. I am like a StreamYard evangelist at this point, although I should be paid for it. But it's one of those tools, like you said, you're trying so many different things, and then you find certain ones that kind of stick. You're like, this one works really well. I like it. And then still trying to find, we were just talking before we went live about innovation and just the constant churning out of new stuff that's coming, which is amazing. But before we get into all of that, I do see we already have some viewers who are watching. If you are watching, Vincent from the Colgate group saying hello from New York. So thank you for joining us. If you are watching, please feel free to put comments on whatever channel you're watching us on, and we can see all of those. So if you have questions for Jim, we'll try to work them in, and we would love to see you as well. I see Heather is also here, so please do keep those comments coming in. I also want to get to know Jim a little bit more. The two of us have never met, so we just jumped on and started talking. But I have heard, of course, of VidCon, and I have heard of, the line that we're using to promote this episode is going virtual with over 1 million unique attendees, and just what that could have been like. So I just want to talk to you first. Tell us a little bit about yourself and about VidCon, and then we can kind of get into all the details and the geek chatter.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, my background is, I'm late in my career to events because I've only been doing it for 6 or 7 years. But was in media, ran magazines and websites, and helped start a cable network about technology. I'm definitely a dyed-in-the-wool geek. Started doing online video and running online video companies back in 2007. Got to know Hank and John Green, who were early YouTube stars, and realized that there was no event for YouTube creators to get together with their fans face-to-face, because it was all, over the internet.
Yeah.
We started VidCon in 2010. Company I was running, Revision 3, ended up sponsoring. I spoke there. I got to know those guys. Like, I love this. And so fast forward 5 years later, after I'd sold the company, I was to Discovery, and couldn't go back, and I had a non-compete for a year. So I went and talked to Hank Green and said, hey, you need any help with that VidCon thing? And he's like, yeah, come on, help the industry track grow. So did that, ended up taking over. And then we sold to Viacom 3 years ago, and now we're part of Viacom. And VidCon, if you don't know what it is, it's the biggest collection of events about online video. So it's festival, summit, conference rolled up into one. We bring the fans and the creators to celebrate their connections. We bring the industry together to talk about how we build big businesses and community-led media. And then we have a creator track, because we really at our core are about galvanizing a creator community, where we teach people to be creators on the platform. Started with YouTube, and then LinkedIn, Facebook, all the places you are, but TikTok, Snap, I could go on and on. That's me in a nutshell.
That's amazing. So it seemed like this is just such a passion of yours, and you got involved. What has it been like over the last 6 or 7 years being on the event side of things? Do you love it?
Yeah, well,
I'm very stressful.
Yeah, as a journalist, running tech magazines and a whole network, a whole cable network about technology. We used to go cover events. I was a big part of it. We'd go to CES, which is going on right now. We'd go to Comdex before that. Sheldon Adelson, who just died, say whatever you want about him, but he did start one of the most amazing tech conferences ever called Comdex, and others too. So I always love events and the power and the energy. It's just very different when you're running them versus going to them. But that energy and people getting together and connecting, and the sort of the planned things that you do, and then the spontaneous things that you do, and the serendipitous things that happen, all of those things I love. And it's really great now being behind the scenes, enabling that and building that, and seeing those communities build up that are just so special when it's done really well.
You speak with such passion. Like, as you're talking, I am just remembering all of these in-person events that I've been to that are amazing. You know, like you said, there's so many things happening at a single event. There's all this content, there's the exhibitor floor, there's the networking, and there's so much that you have in your schedule. And then, you know, I always feel like the best stuff is the stuff that you never planned for, you know, those dinner meetings and whatever happens after the cocktail hour and whatever. And, you know, I told you before we went live, I'm total introvert, but still in-person events has an energy that's just unlike anything else. You know, it's so great. But obviously 2020 has changed that a little bit. What was that like for you guys with everything happening? And I know you guys made this pivot to virtual. How did that happen for you?
Yeah, well, it's we had just finished our second London event at the end of February last year. And when we all regrouped back in the US, we realized that probably wasn't going to we probably weren't going to do any more events that year. We were going to do Mexico and US and Abu Dhabi and Asia. And so, you know, we started thinking, well, how do we engage our audience and stay relevant to them and be really conscious of what they're going through, all of our different audience segments. And how do we do something that isn't just, you know, basically cowpathing an event onto the digital platform? I've been through a couple of digital transitions before on television and on print to you know, to websites and blogs and video and so we said, rather than just trying to do like a 3-day event with, you know, 70 Zoom calls and call it a day, we decided to do a whole summer worth of VidCon where for 13 weeks, we did 10, 12, 13 sessions a week talking to our individual audiences. And we were also trying to recapture not just the education and the information, but the spontaneity and the connection and the ability for people to have that excitement and meet new people and randomly and connect. And so we did a lot of things there. We built a digital community on Discord. We tried a bunch of different pieces of software and web services, but really tried to just engage people at home where they were all summer, but make sure that they could have those connections that they got on VidCon, which they weren't going to get.
I mean, that's amazing. I just got off a Clubhouse conversation and you and I were talking a little bit about that. And one of the conversations I was literally just saying 10 minutes ago, I think one of the critical pieces of a virtual event is meeting people where they are, not just with the kinds of content that you're delivering, but, you know, you mentioned Discord, I mentioned Clubhouse. People are hanging out in so many different places. So even just from a networking standpoint, being able to, you know, have conversations where they're already having conversations is really interesting. And then all this content, what was it like just from the organizer standpoint to put all this together in, I mean, even though it was over the summer, you still did not have months and months to pull this all together.
Well, and I also, you know, I didn't have a team that had a lot of experience in doing, you know, digitally delivered events or video. I mean, we were all really good at doing face-to-face events. And so, but basically I laid it out and said, look, you know, we are going to engage our audiences. We're going to do it. They want it from us. They need it from us. And we took our team of event producers and turned them into video producers and turned them into video event producers and turned them into, you know, online meet and greet producers and all these other things. And it was intense. You know, it was, we asked people to go outside of their comfort zone. And I will say that our small team, they all rose to the occasion. All did an amazing job. We broke them into 4 teams. Everybody learned everything. And it was a little bit like the sort of Harry Potter sorting hat, where some people were better at one thing, some people were better. You know, we had some Gryffindors, we had some Ravenclaws. I don't think we had any Slytherins, but it was a little bit like that. And we really learned a lot. And actually, we learned a lot from our audience, too, about what they liked. And to the point that even after the summer was over, we decided we're just going to keep this going. So we're doing just a couple things a week now, but we continue to do what we call VidCon now every week to engage people. And, you know, even after we go back to doing face-to-face events, we'll keep on engaging with our audiences every week because it's something they want and it's great for our business too.
So can you talk a little bit about a lot of what you're saying? I'm trying to like make a mental list of things to come back to talk about, but you talked about the event producers who are used to the in-person and they had to kind of turn into video producers. I think that's so critical, not just as we do virtual events, but even as we go back to hybrid and even in person. I think the expectations of what the production is going to look like is going to be really different. So what are some of those skills? What are they learning in that transition? What are some of the things we need to know to be really successful in the future of events?
Well, I think, you know, I have a broader issue or something. Like when I think about it, it's people also, you start into it and you think, oh, we're going to make television, right? But it's not television. If you think you're going to make television, you're not going to be successful, because the people who make television, and I've, run cable networks, are really good at it. They've been doing it their whole career, and you're not going to be a television producer. And in the end, what you get from a digitally delivered event, hopefully, are things like the interactivity. I mean, I love the chat that's going on here. I love the ability to connect people, but also because it's live and it's not TV, and we can talk to people. And, I see Lynn talking about her vlogger fair years ago. Could we bring Lynn up here to have a conversation? Well, probably not in the way that this is set up. And we actually never figured out a way to really do that really well. But those are the sorts of things that we need to think about. It's like, how do you take the ability to do, what are the table stakes of doing video? It's got to look good. It's got to sound good. I think audio is almost more important than video. It's got to, it's got a lot of things, and like this interface looks great. A lot of things that you can do there, but also, how do you engage the audience with it, with each other, with the people speaking? And then, which I don't think we figured out yet. We tried for all our sessions. We still do this. Like, come to Discord. We're going to continue the conversation there. It's hard to move people from one place to another.
Yeah.
And so I think, to cycle back to your question, I think you got to learn how to make good, compelling video-based content. Don't get sucked into the trap of it being television. Make sure interactivity is key. And, like, if you look at like watching some of the CES stuff now and other people doing it, it's going on right now, they pre-produced a bunch of stuff, and that's nice. And I could see doing that for, it's like, GM pays, $500,000 for a keynote. Probably want to pre-produce that. But that spontaneity and sense of anything can happen, and the ability to make it more this personal, authentic, connected, all those words that we all know really well. How do you do that?
Yeah.
And still have it be it's like learning all those things. And I don't think any of us are really experts at it yet. And I don't think we've found the perfect platform yet either, although I'm sure it's out there.
I'm not so sure it's out there. I mean, I feel like, everyone is evolving so fast. I hope we find one of them. There's some that look promising. But I was actually just going to ask you about live versus simu-live and pre-recorded. I mean, a lot of what you're talking about, the value that an in-person event has, everyone calls them live events, but to me, they're both live. Mm-hmm. The value that an in-person event has is that it's live and it's changing constantly. And there's conversations. We did 50 live sessions for our TECHSYTALK Global Conference in November. And, that's granted, it's a lot to pull off because there's a lot of risk. Something could happen. Your speaker could not show, but it's the same as what we do in person. I keep telling people live is where it's at for now, at least, because you get these great conversations. And if there were better platforms where we could pull people in, it would be even better. But I guess that you kind of answered the question already, that live is, one of those unique differentiators for sure.
Well, yeah. And look, you look at it, one of the things I learned as we started bringing these event producers in and having them do online and doing, digital events, is initially I didn't do this, but then it took me a little while. I was like, oh, let's categorize it like what we did in the physical event. So this sort of a session is like on our arena stage and it's a performance. This sort of session is like in our ballroom and it's, it's a master talk. And this sort of session is like in our classrooms. And so putting it in the context of what you already know is important. And I say the same thing when we're talking about the platforms and the digital stuff and the technology. Is like, there's table stakes to a live event, right? You got to have electricity, you got to have lighting, you got to have good sound,
yeah,
you got to have comfy chairs. And just like there are table stakes in digital events, you got to have good sound, you got to have good video, it's got to start on time. You don't want things to drop out. But beyond that, it's really about what are the things that we can do to make it an engaging experience, but also make it something that if you missed it live, you kind of missed something important. And so again, we're not successful in that every time.
Sure.
But I do think going into it with how do we make it so that there's FOMO for not being there live, and what is that?
Yeah, that's so
the answer. That's a good question.
It's so critical. Everyone's thinking about it, or at least I hope they are thinking about, those kinds of experiences and what that means. And, again, just talking about hybrid, designing an in-person event that's different from your virtual event and that each has a unique experience. And if you attend one, you're missing out on something from the other, that it's not just, in person is experience A, and virtual is, secondary experience. You just happen to be watching some of the content, that they're designed separately to really, give you that FOMO in both directions would be the ideal. Although, obviously that's a challenge, I think, for everyone.
Yeah. And I think, when you think about the live event on one side and then the virtual event on the other, and we're, as we start thinking about going back to face-to-face events in 2021, we're not going to do it without a digital component. So yes, they're equivalent experiences. They're not exactly the same, to your point, because you can't just like replicate one or the other.
Yeah.
I'm interested in, how do you create great experiences on both sides of that digital divide? That's the wrong word, but you know what I mean. But then how do they interact, right? What are the areas where you can touch between those two experiences and bring people together? Like, for example, we use as our sort of, client layer, display layer for our digital events software called Maestro, that, is a nice wrapper. It actually started in Twitch as a way to wrap Twitch games with interactivity, Twitch streaming. You can do something like this. You could take I'm sure you can take a StreamYard stream and stream it into Maestro and add in additional things to it. But the neat thing there is the QA functionality there, where you have chat and QA, actually can live separately from that console. So I could have it so that if you're watching a stream coming from our ballroom at VidCon and you're watching it online, we'll have the same Q&A and and chat panel, that if you're sitting in the event, it's the same thing. Want to ask a question, use this. So that's one way to do it. We do meet and greets with creators, where I never thought we could do a meet and greet digitally, virtually, but it turns out using this stuff called Chatalize, it works really well. And the fans like it and the creators like it. But now, how do I do a meet and greet in person? And then maybe take that creator and then, turn 90 degrees, and maybe they're in a box or something, I don't know, but then have them do a digital version where you can see it on the big screen and they're interacting. I mean, I don't know what the answer is, but we're starting to think about, how do we bridge that and create shared experiences and shared abilities to network at the same time as leaning into what works best in both of those formats, whether it's live or in person or digitally delivered.
Yeah, and that kind of translates to one of the questions that Lynn was asking. She said they planned a YouTube event called Vlogger Fair years ago, and she's curious how you're offering fan engagement and connection to the rock stars and the influencers in a virtual setting. How do those long fan lines translate to digital? What are you guys doing in that area?
Yeah, really good question. That's where that thing we called, that I just talked about, Chatalize, worked out for us. So traditional meet and greet, you've got 90 or 100 people. We actually have a matching process where we only, we have 1,000 people come to the event, but they match up to the meet and greets they want to go to. So we don't have, 4-hour lines or 5-hour lines, but you got 100, 200 people waiting in line. We do the same thing here, where a creator wants to do a virtual meet and greet. In a real meet and greet, what you do is you get to stand next to them, maybe give them a hug, get a selfie. In a virtual meet and greet that Chatalize runs, very similar, 100 people a minute each or 2 minutes or whatever. But in there, they have a short little conversation, and then they get a digital selfie. And so, or they get the video of the whole thing. And so that is, that is something that works really well. I thought that the fans would want to have that, like, I breathed the same air and I was next to them and I touched them. And it's like, turns out when you can't do that, there's still a connection of being able to just have a conversation with them. And then that validation of your love for that creator or that rock star or that whatever that you can put on your Instagram or your TikTok or other social it's an equivalent, and it works just as well.
That's why platforms like Cameo are so popular, just to get someone to say happy birthday to you or whatever. People will pay for those experiences, even though that's not even a conversation. That's just a recorded, video to a person, which I think is really interesting. Lynn says great ideas. So thank you for that. We do have another question from a Facebook user. I want to remind you guys, if you're watching on Facebook, and be sure to go to StreamYard.com/Facebook and just give us access to see your photo and your name so we know who you are. But before we get to this other question, I wanted to ask you, maybe 10 minutes ago or so, you mentioned cowpathing, and you also mentioned that word prior to going online. So I need to learn from you. What is this? What?
Oh, yeah, so cowpathing. Sorry, I went to college in Vermont and lived there off and on. And if you've ever been to a cow pasture, you'd get your cows here, and then you put their food here, And when the cows, they walk to the food through the, I forget which one was the cow. They walk to the food and they go back and forth, and they, there's like a little path that goes in the grass in the cow field. Well, if you move up here, your food, the cows walk to the old place and then they walk up to the new place rather than going, wait a minute, rather than going at an angle. I should have been a weather person. No, I shouldn't have been. But anyway, we tend to recreate technology by, when we move the food, we keep on going to where the old food was and try and do it in the same way versus what's the diagonal. So I always think when we're going from transitioning from one, from analog to digital technologies, let's not just let's not put a television show on YouTube. Let's not put a book on a blog. Those are the sorts of things that are kind of examples of cowpathing. And anyway, so I think the question was the live and the technical issues though on it, as I see here.
Yes, that's the next question. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think pre-recorded, I mean, it's fine if you're worried about that, but really to me, pre-recording a session is making television. And back to the point of you're never going to be as good as a 60 Minutes producer. I mean, unless you are a 60 Minutes producer or you study that. But so, learn to live with some of the frailties of it, but make sure that you are just like you do in an event where you plan everything so that you can deal with the problems as they come up. If you get 95% of your tech working and it all works, things will pop up. Just have a backup plan. And your audience will understand if you have created an impression in their mind that this is a live event and that, like a live experience, it's going to have issues here and there. It might, but what we're going to deliver you is a great experience that you can interact with. If you're just talking to the audience, sure, you can pre-record it and there's no interactivity, but that's not really a live event.
Right. That shouldn't be a session on its own as it is. It's funny to me because this event organizers have been talking about the greatness of pre-recorded sessions because it takes all that, worry away. But I completely agree with what you're saying. This is what we do in events. We are constantly managing risk, planning for all the scenarios. I definitely understand the 30 seconds late on virtual and people are in the chat. It's not working. Is it working for you? The chat is, I get it. There's a little more pressure. 30 seconds in an in-person, people wouldn't have even noticed. But it's all about, communication. And this is what we do. And to your point, I think it is completely worth the risk to have the live experience. Yeah, that's what makes us so different.
Yeah. And we are in a live experience, which, congrats to you for doing this and streaming a few different places and bringing comments in. But this is this is a live event. It's not, you're not doing television, you're not pre-recording. And, I know people who go out and they'll do a conversation like this and they'll pre-record it and they'll put this in and that. And it's like, it just doesn't feel as real to me.
Yeah. Yeah. We have several clients who do pre-recorded Q&As and you can tell. It's like the second it starts airing, people know if it's live or pre-recorded. It doesn't matter how much you do to it, how great you are. And Brian's asking, what are we calling live? Is it in-person live, virtual live? This is my biggest issue with, people talking about live events have died. It's like, no, live events still happen every single day. They're just virtual now. To me, in-person and virtual are the differentiators. Live is both. But what do you think about that?
Yeah, I agree with you. In person and virtual, it's IRL. I actually heard this recently, and I've co-opted it. IRL versus URL, right? So yeah. IRL in real life, URL. URL, by the way, stands for Universal Record Locator. In case you wondered what URL was.
I don't know why I knew that. That's
you're a geek like me. I love it. But URL for digitally delivered, IRL for in real life. There, try that.
Yeah. I love that. Ken is saying, thank you for pointing out the value of live events. He is with a company called Glisser, which I was actually going to mention a few minutes ago when you were talking about the chat that can be used for both. They were kind of a second screen experience for in-person events, but it was a very simple transition, at least from my perspective, a very simple transition for them to do hybrid really, really well. And I think that's a great experience about pulling those, a great comment you made about pulling your two audiences together and giving them some meaningful touch points as well. Michelle says in-person is different from live and people are using them interchangeably because it can be live in person or virtually. It's like one of these, everyone has, there's the Live Events Coalition that's all about the events industry that's kind of been decimated in the last year. It's interesting, everyone's perspective.
Yeah. I use the term, face-to-face F2F2 a lot.
Yeah.
On an email. It's like our F2F versus digital or whatever. So yeah, I don't know. Someone come up with a good set of names that we can all agree on.
You just create a glossary for 2021 and beyond. We can go from there. So as we look to the future, I know you said you're going to continue doing digital while you bring back in-person. What are you guys thinking in terms of when in-person will come back for you, or how that's going to look, and any trends that you see now that the world has been upended and people behavior has completely changed and they've experienced all this new virtual stuff?
Well, right now we're planning for our US event in July of 2021. It's in Anaheim. We haven't put tickets on sale yet, but we're deep into planning it with the understanding that we will only do it if it can be safe and if the audience wants it. So luckily we've reorganized our workflow a little bit, so we don't really need to make any big decisions until, later, until basically spring. And so we're optimistic, super optimistic it's going to happen. But, obviously we're planning for all eventualities.
Yeah.
We've got a couple more events in the latter half of this year. Abu Dhabi planned for December, Asia in November. And so those, I think we're in good shape there as we get towards the end of the year. But the events will be different. Recency bias, which we all have, says that we overweight things that have happened to us more recently and underweight things that have not happened recently or ever, which is why in February, we're all like, oh, pandemic, it'll be over in a couple months. We'll be back to this. Or it's like, it's not a big deal. And now that we've been living through it for a year, we'll be like, even after I think we all get vaccinated, and we'll be like, oh my God, I'm not going to worried. I might get the box or whatever. So I think we're, look, table stakes at events for us on festivals for the last couple of years had been, mags and bags, checking people's walking through a magneton or whatever they're called. Securing the space, making sure that, we have dogs roaming around, police dogs, and it's just making a safe space for people to go to now means checking temperatures and masks and, who knows, are we going to get vaccination passports and things like that? So giving both the impression that something is safe and also the facts that it's safe too, but making it appear that way, but also making, having something to behind that as well. So to me, that's one thing that's super important. I think the other is come latter half of this year in 2022, 23, we all want to get out, right? We all want to go to things. There's going to be an explosion of people, pent-up demand to go to events, to go to concerts, to go to festivals, to travel, to get out there. Business travel probably might take a little bit longer, but people are going to want to go. And so how do you handle that and work with that? There will certainly be, there will be less events because unfortunately this is, wrung some of the excess out of the industry, I guess is one way to put it. But I also think that we were talking about hybrid before. You cannot have a real event without having a hybrid digital component because there are still going to be people who want to go to your event, but for health, time, distance, money reasons can't. And how do we embrace them as part of what we do as well?
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. Thank you so much for spending time with us. And thank you to all the people who are watching live and commenting. It's always nice to see that. We will be sharing this audio on our podcast and the video will be available on our blog. And Jim, I've learned a lot from you in 38 minutes or whatever that we've been on. And I'm so glad we were connected. I hope we can continue to stay in touch. If people want to learn more about VidCon or about you, where would you like to send them?
VidCon.com is a great place to go. Come follow me on LinkedIn. I'm J Louderby, JLOUDERB. That's basically what I am on TikTok and Twitter and LinkedIn and everywhere. But yeah, come over to LinkedIn and I don't know, hopefully we'll be back talking to you, Liz, at some point too. So it was a lot of fun. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. All right, we will talk to you guys. Well, we'll talk to you at some point. And for all of you who are watching, we'll be back again next Wednesday for another episode of the Event Hustler Show. And we'll see you everywhere on social except TikTok. I'm totally not on TikTok.